First of all, I'm just curious, how many of you have heard of JRuby before? All right, good. That's changed a bit over the years. Not many hands at the first RailsConf when I did a talk like this. How many of you are running something on JRuby or have run something on JRuby? Okay, probably about a third of the room. That's cool. So this will be new for some of you and an update for the rest of you. Let's get right to it. I got a lot of ground to cover. First off, one thing you may know about me, if you follow me at all, is that I am a big craft beer fan, and I brought 3 very nice craft beers from Minnesota that I'll be giving away to anyone who wants to ask a question or wants to come up and say hi or just likes beer. So I've got a few different ones here. So if you don't like IPAs, I got a very nice Imperial Honey Lager that's also very good. Okay, let's get to it. So thanks first of all to Red Hat for sponsoring our work on JRuby for the past, gosh, almost 10 years now. Prior to that, we worked at Sun Microsystems, we worked for Engine Yard. We're very happy for all the folks that have sponsored us over the years. One of the things that's missing for me this year is my other half, Tom Enabo, who has worked with me since we got employed by Sun Microsystems in 2006. He is still trying to stay safe from the COVID and still sort of staying safe in the bubble at home. But wish him a happy birthday on Twitter. He really wishes he could be here for this conference. So, first of all, a little bit about JRuby. Most of you know what it is, what are the basics about it, but we'll get a little bit of background here. So JRuby, of course, is a Ruby implementation running on top of the Java virtual machine. Now, we focus on trying to be a Ruby implementation first, so that it's as much like running regular Ruby as possible. The things that you're used to doing, the commands, the command line world, the tooling, all generally should work the same. But we are also a JVM language, which means we get the benefit of being on top of the JVM. I'll get into a little bit of that later. We really expect that your Ruby code should generally just work. Sometimes there's extensions that need to be replaced, or you need to use a non-forking server or something along those lines. But usually most code should just work. There are lots of folks that are deploying JRuby now and over the years. This is a little collection of logos I took a few years ago, just folks that are running JRuby in any capacity. Some of them have moved on from JRuby, some have moved on from Ruby, but there's some exciting ones on here, like there's a telescope array in California that was orchestrated by a JRuby-based application. I'm not sure if I have the Oslo International Airport, but they ran all of the airplane refueling terminals off of a little JRuby application. It's kind of a terrifying thing to think about, but exciting nonetheless. So lots of folks have used it over the years and lots of folks are using it now. Ruby compatibility. So first off, like I said, we try to be a Ruby implementation first. The status has lagged a little bit because of COVID. We haven't gotten as much work done. We've had a few delays. The current version of JRuby 9.3.4 is compatible with Ruby 2.6, which if you're keeping track, that's about 4 years old at this point, almost 4 years old. But we are making a big leap forward with JRuby 9.4 to be released any day now. Probably in the next month or two, we'll have it out. And that's going to jump all the way to Ruby 3.1. So we're going to be caught up on compatibility again. Then we'll feel more comfortable backing off, spending some time on performance again, taking advantage of some new JVM features, and trying to just generally improve the experience once the compatibility is good to go. Even beyond that, we are generally faster than CRuby in most cases. So this optimization is just going to make it even better. Now, what are these JVM benefits that we get? Well, of course, it's very widely deployed, widely supported. It seems like every major software company has their own flavor of JVM that they're maintaining and contributing to these days. So there's lots of different JVMs, lots of different platforms that are supported. We get a JIT for free. We get multiple garbage collectors for free that scale on all sorts of different sorts of loads and different sizes of data. We can run on almost any platform because there's so many people maintaining JVMs. And we get real parallel threads, real concurrency, and great tools to go around it. In addition to that, we have all the tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of JVM libraries that are out there. We get all the tooling that comes with it. And JRuby generally will work the same anywhere you can have a JVM. If you can install a JVM on a platform, you can run JRuby there. As an example of one of the tools, this is one called Visual VM using the Visual GC plugin. This is actually a live view of the different JVM heaps in the garbage collector, how they're filling up and emptying and then dumping old objects into the next generation. But these tools are all over for the JVM. There's a whole bunch of different free tools out there that let you monitor the application, and several of these are just available out of the box. I mentioned we have real parallel threads, so unlike regular JRuby, if you spin up multiple threads, you actually will be using multiple cores, and you can take one JRuby process and max out any size system you want. We'll be able to handle the load and spread it out across all the processors. There's also a lot of fun stuff we can do. This is called Prugin. It's a JRuby framework on top of Minecraft, Java edition, that lets you write plugins in Ruby. And so this particular one is just modifying how many chickens come out of an egg when you throw the egg. This was developed by Tom just as kind of a fun thing when we were playing a lot of Minecraft together. He actually ended up ruining a world because he created too many chickens, and then he sent wolves after the chickens, and it just completely collapsed at that point. All right, so getting started with JRuby. JRuby.org has all the information, has downloads, links to nightly builds, and so on. Generally, the only thing that you're going to need to have on your system is some JDK, OpenJDK build from somebody. There's Amazon, Microsoft is doing a great OpenJDK build now. Of course, Oracle has them, Azul, lots of different ways you can get a JVM for whatever platform you happen to be running on. We do support Java 8 still and will for this 9.4 release, but probably going to drop that after this. It's about 10 years old at this point. It's time to start moving on. And then you can install JRuby through the same means that you would install regular Ruby. If you're using RVM or RBN Ruby build, all those, they all have support for JRuby. Most of them have support for JRuby head if you want to pull down the 9.4 stuff before we've got it released. And of course, we have a tarball you can unpack. We have a Windows installer if you need those things, but pretty easy. Get the JDK installed, and then you're pretty much there. Here's a little session with IRB, just calling into one of the standard Java APIs, the Java Lang runtime, checking available processors on the system, checking the free memory. It just shows how easy it is for you to take some Ruby code and mix it in with Java libraries and Java APIs. So a little more to the point, JRuby on Rails, which is why we're really here. So why would we want to run JRuby on Rails? Well, we've actually been working on this for a very long time. I think it's closing in on the 15th anniversary of us actually running Rails for the first time. And I don't think that was even a 1.0 version of Rails back then. There are lots of folks that are running JRuby for Rails applications and for smaller things like Sinatra or Rhoda or little service APIs, and at huge scales sometimes, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of requests per minute. Again, get the benefit of the JVM, all the libraries, all of the languages that you can use there. You can mix and match with Java and Scala and Kotlin or Clojure or whatever else, and run it alongside your Rails and Ruby application. And we generally believe this is still the best way to scale a large Rails app. Anybody that's tried to scale over, 1,000 requests a minute, 10,000 requests a minute, there's a lot of work to scale out a standard JRuby Rails application. We make it a lot simpler. Just one JRuby, throw all the threads, throw all the requests at it. Configuration is usually fairly minimal. Swapping out some native extensions, C libraries that we don't support. Doing some modifications to the database configuration. Most of the JDBC drivers don't do Unix sockets, for example, so we'll give it a TCP port to connect to. And here, we don't use workers. We don't use separate processes. You just say however many threads you want to handle requests, and we'll make it run. So you can have a single JRuby process and throw all of the requests on the machine at it. Like I say, we're a little bit behind. So Rails 6 works really well with JRuby 9.3.4. How many people have moved to Rails 7 already? Not too many. So if you've got existing Rails 6 apps that you might want to try out, see if you can scale up, you certainly can do that right now with JRuby that we've got. This is the standard version that's out currently. And this is deployed all over the world. We know because people come to us and say something's not right sometimes. So they're all over the world doing stuff with Rails on JRuby. We are catching up though. Like I say, we are releasing 3.1 support very soon, and then that will allow us to run Rails 7. We've already been testing it and things are looking great. The main work that's left to be done is updating our version of ActiveRecord that's built on top of the Java database APIs so that it supports all the different databases. This is everything except action or active record. 99% stuff passing. We really didn't expect this to change. We keep an eye on what these test results are. And most of these remaining failures, there's a lot of little goofy things in here, like, all right, fine, we got a float rounding difference between JRuby and CRuby. You know, there's only so much we can do about those kind of things. But we try to patch the tests. We try to match what Rails expects. And generally, the remaining failures are not very critical. I mentioned that our active record runs on top of JDBC. The project is activerecord-jdbc-adapter. We try to version match this, so you always know that Rails 6 will use version 60 of our driver, Rails 7 will use version 70 of our driver, and so on. This is in progress right now. I, for this talk, tested SQLite and MySQL quite a bit. They're looking very good compatibility-wise and performance. Postgres in the Rails code base requires the most amount of work, most amount of changes. So that'll be coming up soon, and we'll have that released in the next month or two. Okay, so migrating to JRuby. Usually the simplest way is just to try to bundle install your app. You'll find that almost all those standard Ruby libraries will work. The popular extensions like Nokogiri, JSON, and so on, we have JRuby versions of those, so those should work. Usually the failure is going to come in where there's a smaller or more obscure or very specific to your project C extension that we don't support. I'll talk a little bit later about how to deal with that situation. We also have a tool called JRuby Lint that you can just gem install, go into your app and run it. This will give you tips about C extensions that you might have that we know there's a replacement for. It will look through your code and try to find things that could potentially be problematic for parallel execution or concurrency. Just trying to give you a little easier path to migrate an application and give you some tips on how to make that move. As far as C extensions, well, there's a few different ways that we recommend people deal with it. Sometimes you just don't need it. It turns out that it's only used in a development capacity, or it's a profiling thing that you're not looking at. Maybe you don't even know that you still have it. In a lot of cases, people are like, that code was in one file, we just got rid of it and used a pure Ruby version. So maybe you don't need it, you can just remove it. Very often, whatever the library is, there's going to be a standard JVM library, probably a dozen of them. You can pull any one of those down, throw it into your application, and just start calling it directly from Ruby code. So that's probably the quickest and easiest way to actually replace an extension we don't support. Oftentimes, if you just use a pure Ruby version of the same library, we'll still run maybe not as fast as the C code, but fast enough that it's not really a problem. Especially if it's a piece of code that's not used very often, just throw some Ruby code in there to replace it and it should work well. Finally, the heaviest part of this, if it seems like it's a library lots of people are using and we really want to support it, we'd love to get your help porting it into a JRuby extension. Our API is similar to CRuby's, but of course it's written in Java. A good example would be the Psych YAML engine, where we wrap a YAML library on Java. The C version wraps libyaml, but the C and Java code to do that looks almost identical. I just went line for line and ported Aaron's code from Psych to make it match up. So it can go pretty quickly. We also have a wiki page that lists known extensions that don't have a direct replacement or an automatic replacement. We try to keep this updated, and the JRuby Lint tool actually will go and parse this page and look for the alternatives. So anytime we run into a good replacement, we try to keep it updated here. So if we manage to migrate and we've got our application running, then the next thing would be deploying, which should pretty much just be like you would deploy regular CRuby. We recommend Puma. It works great. It handles multiple threads and high concurrency really well. And now being the default server for Rails, just stick with it. It works great. Deployment can be like you would typically deploy your Ruby apps. I'm not even sure what's the latest fashion for doing Ruby app deployments, but it'll work just the same on JRuby. Or you actually can bundle up JRuby and dependencies and your app as a Java web application and deploy on any server that supports Java web applications. One file and just throw it into the cloud and it's out. Of course, we don't have a C compiler requirement because we don't support C extensions. And JRuby extensions are generally pre-compiled and shipped as a jar file. Again, write once, run anywhere. Once we've got it released as a gem, you can pull it in and you don't have to rebuild any of it. There will be some tweaks. We've got some recommendations on the wiki about how to tweak the JVM. Probably the most important one here is if you don't tell the JVM not to use all the memory in your system, it will use all the memory in your system, or it will use as much as it really thinks that it can use. It'll stretch out quite a bit. But for most applications, you can choke that down quite a bit and say, okay, I only need about 500 megabyte heap or a 250 meg heap, and that'll run the application just fine. We also recommend using the environment variables, JRuby opts, Java opts, and there's a couple other ones, just to make sure that if there's any sub-processes that get launched, they also pick up those flags. All right, so we've migrated to JRuby, we've deployed it, now we want to see how it's scaling up. We want to scale up the application, which is the whole point of this talk. So, scaling Rails. This has kind of been the classic problem with JRuby. It's gotten better, especially with Puma, the way that it handles the workers and spreads out the load, but it still isn't quite as efficient as it could be if it had concurrent threads. Even with shared memory, even with preloading applications, having multiple processes is still wasting resources. You're still ending up with multiple copies of the application in memory. You're ending up with N GCs that are all fighting for memory contention. It's just not as efficient as being able to run all of those in the same process space. On the other hand, JRuby, we really can take a single process with 10, 20, 100 threads, throw all the requests at it, use a single garbage collector, a single memory space, and use the resources much more efficiently. So I did some benchmarking. It's been a long time since we took a look at performance here, but I did some basic benchmarking of just the scaffolded blog post application running on MySQL. It was just on my local, recent generation i7 laptop. It's really similar to production, but there's a caveat there. Compared with JRuby 3.1 running Rails 7, this is all running Rails 7 here, and JRuby 9.4, so this is off of JRuby master. We're running with Puma, and the main difference there is with JRuby we configure it for 20 threads, and with JRuby I did 10 workers by 2 threads. My machine only has about 8 cores, 10 processes should be able to use those all, but sometimes threads can also help if it's blocked a little bit on I/O. So caveats here, this is all running locally on the machine I did it, so the benchmark driver, the database is all on the same machine. Not the best way to benchmark, but good enough for this. It's a very minimal application, of course. I used Siege to drive this benchmark. You'll have your own favorite HTTP driver that may behave a little bit differently with regards to keep alive and so on. And of course, Warmup Time is a thing you'll notice in some of these slides. All right, so for this simple application and just doing a view of one of the blog post things on this trivial scaffolded app, JRuby clocks in at a respectable 2,500-ish requests per second. And then for this particular end-to-end example, JRuby throws in another 1,000 requests per second, just without any tuning, without any modification. So we're already doing quite a bit better on just straight line end-to-end performance of the app. And now, of course, the real thing that slows down most Rails applications is how ActiveRecord performs. ActiveRecord itself has steadily improved over the years. It used to be much slower, but it's been slimmed down. They're making better use of prepared statements. They have an actual model API for building up your queries. But it is still pretty heavy. There's a lot of Ruby code and a lot of work to run it fast. Because of these improvements, JRuby has steadily gotten better and better at running ActiveRecord as ActiveRecord's improved. But we also get benefits from the JVM, which continues to improve garbage collection-wise, JIT, and optimization. And we're pretty happy with the performance as it is right now, with room to grow. Again, this is just using local MySQL. Caveats here, it's looking good. There's more that we can do on this, but these are very specific cases that I'm running. It would be best for you to take your application, throw your models at it, and see how it actually performs on JRuby. All right, so some basic selects of different types of fields. We're just going to a row in the database and trying to pull out each of these elements. JRuby has pretty much consistent performance across the board. JRuby, with these different select types, is almost twice as fast on all of these. And this kind of carries over to most of the lighter weight, I would say, active record operations, the ones that don't need to create new rows in the database, the ones that don't need to do extremely large queries. Update performance is actually even better, so most of your application is going to be viewing and updating, right? We're stuck with these for this particular talk. JRuby, kind of up and down. Some of these have a little bit more overhead as they're converted into whatever the database wants. Date time goes down a bit, the timestamp goes down a bit. Here, JRuby is a good 2.5 times faster on these operations. We're happy with this, but we know that there's a lot more that we could do. And we're going to be doing some profiling over the summer to keep this performance going. So a little true story to finish off the scaling side of this. We had a user that had a really large Rails application they were running. They had 40 extra large instances on EC2. You can imagine the cost of that. That's tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to run all of that. They had 40 worker processes per server using JRuby, just trying to scale out what they needed. With that, they got about 100 to 150,000 requests per minute with a 50 to 75 millisecond response time. It's respectable, but it's a lot of resources to throw at an application like that. They decided to try and do a prototype and migrate to JRuby, made more use of threading, had fewer instances. They dropped this down to 10 extra larges, so cut their hosting costs down to 25% of what they were before. Consistently over 150,000 requests per minute, and that was just their initial attempt. They could continue to improve that afterwards, and the response times were much more consistently under 50 milliseconds. So clearly this is working for large-scale applications, and it should probably work for you. Now, I do have to be honest about some of the downsides of JRuby. So being on the JVM, we have to contend with startup and warm-up issues a bit. Compared with JRuby, where pretty much everything starts out native, it's compiled C code, almost everything in JRuby gets interpreted by the JVM. So our parser, our compiler, interpreter, the JIT code, the Ruby code, once it JITs down, turns into JVM bytecode, and that gets interpreted for a while. So we have a slower startup and a much longer tail for warm-up. We're doing various things to try and improve this, and we've got tips to help if it's a real problem for your app, but it's something to know about. There is always a bit of warm-up time for JRuby, and optimizing runtime just needs extra time to analyze your code, profile it, optimize and compile it down to native code to an optimized version of that code. Again, there are JVMs that are working on pre-warming or snapshotting the application, so you can start it up with an already warm JVM, and we're just starting to play with some of those now. An example of the startup time issue, well, here's just doing a gem version is considerably slower than JRuby. Listing about 350 gems, again, we don't slow down to the same multiple that JRuby does, but we're still quite a bit slower. This is really not necessarily our fault. This is kind of just the fact that the JVM takes a while to optimize our code. This same operation of listing 350 gems gets 4 times faster if we just let it run repeatedly in the same process. Again, trying to find a way that we can get the JVM to save more of this data off, save more of this optimized code will help us in the future. We do have a --dev flag that turns off some of our optimizations, turns off some of the JVM's optimizations. Very good for local development, cut the amount of time to get the, commands up and running quickly. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, the warm-up issue. We had our two results with JRuby and JRuby. What this actually looked like was about 2 to 3 minutes of running the benchmark before we got to that full performance. Some people will pre-warm up their application. They'll do a deploy, run some script that will basically just hit the server with a bunch of common activities, and then they're warmed up. But like I say, in the future, looking at OpenJDK improvements for startup and warm-up, looking at JVMs that can save off the running state so that it stays hot for the next deployment. And there are some native and ahead of time compilation things that we're also going to look at. So this is a known problem, and we are working on it. Wrapping up, doing pretty good on time here. So future for JRuby, like I say, 9.4 will come out soon. You should be able to pull JRuby head or download one of our nightlies and give it a shot now. Like I say, I ran all the demos and benchmarks and tests for this talk with JRuby Master, JRuby 9.4, and Rails 7. So we're really close to the point that we could just release it. We got a lot of optimization work coming the rest of the year. And we're looking forward to using some of the new, really cool JVM features like real native fibers, built-in foreign function interface for calling C libraries, and of course the JIT and the GCs constantly get better. So JRuby on Rails. Rails 6 support is very stable. Rails 7 support is right around the corner, so we're catching up with that. We really want to try and help you save money and save resources. We don't get paid to sell anything related to JRuby, or Red Hat basically just sponsors our project because it's cool and we're doing something good for the community. So come talk to me. We'll see if we can't get your app running and save you some dollars and resources, and we'll see if we can get it going. That's all I got. All right, thank you. And it looks like we got 4 minutes or so for questions. So yeah, right up here in front. Right, so the question, when you're writing target JRuby, when you're thinking about writing for JRuby, do you need to do more for concurrency, parallelism to make the code safe? Rails does a great job of this. If you write a Rails application, I don't know, there were a lot of people in the concurrency talk that was right before this one next door, but if you're writing your application in the typical Rails way, generally that state will be shared, or that state won't be shared, and it'll avoid having most of those threading issues. Now, if you start getting down to the metal and you want to start spinning up multiple threads or thread pools or executors or whatever, then yes, of course, you'd need to pay a little bit more attention to parallelism. But generally, Rails covers you for that. Right, so things that may have been influenced by JRuby that have helped the ecosystem. Well, one of them is Rack. Rack is very much like servlets that have come out of the Java community. So now we can swap out the server underneath our application. The whole push to get Rails to be thread safe internally was very much driven by wanting to run on JRuby. And they used JRuby to actually test it, because clearly you're not going to be getting the same results out of CRuby. And of course, we still contribute to the Ruby spec, and we work with all of the different projects, Bundler, Ruby Gems, all the standard libraries. And we're constantly trying to help improve the ecosystem and make sure things stay high performance and good for concurrency. Oh yes, about a mutant and Torquebox. Those were two Red Hat projects that basically were trying to take advantage of the whole Java enterprise stack and make it a nice little Ruby application server so you could deploy this stuff. These days, not really. I really have hoped that someone in the community might have been interested in taking over or helping to get Torquebox back out there, but it's not really happened, and the folks that were doing it at Red Hat have moved on. We've kind of just been focusing on supporting the typical sorts of Ruby applications that people deploy today, but it still does deploy on a Java enterprise server or web application server, and you can still call all of those services that are there. It's just not as neatly tied together as it was in Torquebox. All right, I think we got one or two more. Yeah, right up front there. Okay, so hot reload and how that fits with JRuby. Well, if you're doing like a rolling restart, a rolling deployment, that'll work exactly the same way. Again, with the caveat that there'll be some warm-up time. You may need to warm up those servers before you put them back into circulation. Hot reloading capabilities that are at the Ruby or the framework level or the library level, it should work pretty much the same way. JRuby doesn't turn all Ruby code directly into Java, so we don't run into a lot of the same problems. If you're reloading it at a Ruby level, it will actually pick up the new code, and the old code will eventually get thrown away. So most of the stuff that works for CRuby should still work for JRuby. All right, one more in the back there. Right. So memory usage and on these benchmarks in particular. So I did take some measurements. I wanted to get a little bit more accurate information, which is why I didn't include it. But for that example where it was JRuby with 20 threads versus CRuby with 10 processes of 2 threads, without tuning the JVM, JRuby jumped up to like 2.2 gig, and it was like, yeah, I'm having a party. But if we choked that down and we said, oh, run it only with 300 meg heap or a 250 meg heap, it was more in the 700 to 800 megabyte range. On the CRuby side, it was 10 processes, pretty much consistently across the board, 1 to 120 megabytes, so over a gig at that point. That's kind of the failover point, is around 8 to 10 concurrent requests that you want to be able to handle. Usually that's when we'll start to come out ahead on memory. And if you're doing 100, we're way ahead. So, all right, I think that's it. If you wanted a beer, come on up and let me know if you want to try JRuby.